tonight. McKnight tonight.
Wrong again.
McKnight tonight. McKnight tonight.
I've seen that since university.
Fun, insightful interviews from a Washington McKnight tonight. McKnight tonight. Here comes McKnight tonight.
Welcome to McKnight Tonight. Now, here's Rob McKnight.
Hello and welcome to McKnight Tonight. It's Tipsy Thursday. Yes, it is, which means the opinions might be strong and the drinks might be stronger. This is quite nice. We're wrapping up the week in style tonight because we are then taking a short break next week. That's right. No new episodes while we recharge the batteries. But don't go anywhere. Keep an eye on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/@McKnightTonight because I will be uploading some special content while we're off air. Amanda, are you looking forward to the break?
Woohoo!
Amanda's sort of saying, it won't be a break for you, Robbie.
No.
But I tell you what, when we come back, I have some big interviews lined up. These will be really, you don't want to miss them. So Monday week, make sure you are here at 9 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, 8 p.m. in Queensland, 6 p.m. in Perth, because it's all going to go down. Could even be headline-making interviews. We'll see. All right, let's get into what is coming up on tonight's show. President Trump turns on Vladimir Putin. I'll explain what's happening and what's likely to happen next. Then the Liberal Party turns on its own leader. Everyone's turning. Sussan Ley is under pressure like never before. In Rob's Rant, I'm calling out selfish dog owners. Plus, I've got an extraordinary interview with a woman who escaped what she calls a cult in the name of God. That's all ahead on this edition of McKnight Tonight. Pour yourself a drink and settle in because we are getting into our hot topics. And it seems everyone in the world knew Putin was just stringing President Trump along. Everyone, that is, of course, except President Trump. Now realising Russia will not work towards peace with Ukraine, the United States has now imposed new, tremendous, they're being called, sanctions on Russia, directly targeting two of its biggest oil giants. President Donald Trump says months of talks with Vladimir Putin have not gone anywhere, and that's despite Putin's visit with Trump to Alaska. So, Washington is tightening the screws. It means American companies will not be able to do business with these Russian outlets. Officials say the goal is to cut off key revenue stream funding Russia's war in Ukraine. The timing follows Russia's latest overnight barrage in Ukraine that killed 7 people, including 2 children, and hit a kindergarten. Kiev's ambassador in Washington welcomed the US move, saying maximum pressure is essential to achieve peace. I mean, the whole world called it out when Vladimir Putin went to Alaska. Everyone was going, why is Trump falling for this? And I think it's because Trump really thought he could do a deal. But what he doesn't realize is Putin will give all the signs of a deal. But the problem with Putin is he has no intention of following through. So I do think Trump can do a deal. I genuinely believe that. But he doesn't know how to deal with someone who is just completely lying. Even though Trump lies all the time. But I think at the core, he'll lie about things, but a deal to him is a deal. We saw that when Malcolm Turnbull called him out. Remember when Malcolm Turnbull, we were sending asylum seekers to the US, and Trump called Turnbull and said, we're not taking them, taking them. And Turnbull, probably one of the only good things he did as Prime Minister of this country, he said, Donald, we had a deal. And Trump respected the deal and he followed through with it and he allowed that to happen. So I think a deal is sacrosanct to Donald Trump. You handshake on a deal, it's a deal. You lie about everything else, but the deal is the deal. But Putin doesn't do that. So how do you deal with someone that isn't going to do that? And now Trump is finally, at this point, seeing the line. It could change tomorrow, of course, and he's imposing these sanctions. But sanctions alone won't end the war. But hitting Russia's biggest cash cows, this is a serious escalation. Because if the oil money dries up, the Kremlin's options narrow. The question is now, does Moscow blink or does this push the conflict into a new phase? We have gotten mixed reports about Trump saying Tomahawk missiles could be used, long-range missiles could be used by Ukraine. Trump has now denied that that is an option on the table, but it's obviously something Ukraine's asking for, because the fact is Ukraine aren't going to go down with a fight. No matter how many times you yell at Zelensky that he needs to give up land, Ukraine's not going to do that. And you can't blame them. Would America give up land? No. They're fighting for their sovereignty. Never underestimate the person being bullied, because sometimes when they stand up to a bully, it's unexpected, but it unites a nation. Ukraine is united, and they will keep fighting until the bitter end. Putin will promise deals, never fulfill. Zelensky said that. He warned Donald Trump. But Donald Trump finally seems to be listening. Well, I can see the feedback is already coming through, so let me know your thoughts too by going to youtube.com/@McKnight tonight. Really love hearing from you. You can do it on Facebook as well. But if you're on X or LinkedIn, we just can't get those comments, so you need to go over to the YouTube page for it to be seen. All right, let's move on. Because federal Liberals are turning on Opposition Leader Sussan Ley, with senior members publicly rejecting her attacks on Kevin Rudd. Now, you might remember she demanded he be brought home after that well-documented interaction with Donald Trump, the one where Donald Trump said, "I don't like you and I never will." Well, former Shadow Minister Andrew Hastie, who recently quit the front bench, has joined Victorian Senator Jane Hume in breaking ranks, saying it's time to move on from Ley's push to have Rudd removed as Australia's US ambassador. Hume labelled Ley's comments a little bit churlish after what was otherwise seen as a successful meeting between President Trump, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Rudd in Washington. And Hastie, once a close ally of Ley, added his own jab, telling 2GB Radio he believes Trump did in fact know who Rudd was and was just trolling the Australian ambassador for good TV. I wouldn't put it past Trump. Now, the problem here is the comments undermine Ley's central argument that Rudd's role should be reviewed because Trump didn't recognise him during the Oval Office meeting. And then, of course, the opposition leader says she stands by her comments but has been refusing to repeat them at press conferences, I have noticed, over the past 2 days. And we're now in a situation where senior Liberals are effectively siding with Kevin Rudd, if you can believe it, saying the diplomatic humiliation was handled with dignity and should be left behind. And there is widespread acclaim for Kevin Rudd. In actual fact, if Trump hadn't had a go at him, we wouldn't know all the hard work that Rudd did behind the scenes. He's now being lauded. And when the Liberals are getting behind Kevin Rudd instead of their own leader, you know there's a problem. This is the latest sign of tension inside the coalition. Look, there's growing frustration at Ley's leadership style and her handling of internal dissent since taking over from Peter Dutton. Because when your own side starts calling your comments churlish, that's just another problem. That's another weight you've got. Her authority is clearly being tested. I said months ago, when someone left, it might have been Hastie or Angus Taylor, I said she wasn't going to last long in the role. Her time is coming to an end. It's just whether the Liberals will pull the trigger, because she just looks desperate. Every time she goes up trying to find something to claw into, she just looks desperate. And today the Liberals turned on some legislation that they'd previously been supported, and it's just trying to wedge Labor. It's policy the Liberals believe in, and they still can't back it because they are now desperately trying to go against everything Labor, because Anthony Albanese at the moment is looking like a hero. Trump loved his high ratings, as in popularity, winning the election so decisively. And he's a hero with Trump. He's come back to Australia the victor. There might be questions about superannuation money being funneled into US companies, but on the whole, Australians aren't going to care about that. That's finance people. Anthony Albanese did well. Kevin Rudd did well. And the Libs don't know what to do. And the Libs, and some Libs, are supporting Labor. We're in cuckoo land. And when they're supporting Labor and Labor people like Rudd, you know Ley's time is pretty much done. Hey, we didn't get to do this last night. Let's do it tonight. I want you to have a look at this video of a dog not on a leash in a park where the rule is dogs must be on a leash. Have a look and then we'll talk.
No lead?
No. As you can see, he's trained, so I don't mind.
I'm sure she's a perfect dog for it.
And what dog is it? What dog is he?
That's immaterial. The law is all dogs must be on leads in this park.
Anyways, bye. Heel.
The arrogance. Not of the older man. He's right. The law of that park or the rule is dogs must be on a leash. Someone always thinks they're above the rules, don't they? Look at, and that dog is obviously well trained. Obviously, you can see it. But that's not the point. Dogs are supposed to be on a leash in that park. It is pure arrogance to not be on the leash when everyone else has to play by those rules. What kind of dog is it? Who cares? That man is absolutely right. It's immaterial. I mean, I think I've told this story before when I was doing some exercise many years ago and I was going out for a run in the morning and I was running around a park and this big horse of a dog came up to me, jumped up and was all over me. And the dog owner was at the other end of the park and was not calling the dog off and must have thought, oh, Derek, I'm going to call the dog Derek. Derek's having a bit of fun, no problems. It was a problem. I did not like basically having my walk/run, run/walk, hobble, you know, trying to get through the day.
Walk.
Interrupted by this horse. It was all over. And you know what? Leashes were meant to be on there, but I couldn't believe the owner wasn't saying, Derek, get here. There was none of that. And I was just expected to take it. And you know what? I never said anything. Being me now, I would say something. I can tell you that. When the park says put your dogs on the leash, put your dogs on the leash. It's really simple. And if anyone disagrees with this, I will be shocked. Absolutely shocked. Come at me. That's Rob's rant. Come at me. Think I need a drink. Plenty ahead on this edition of McKnight Tonight. A huge story we're going to cover tonight about a lady who was in a cult of God, she calls it. It's a fascinating story, so I hope you'll join me for that. We will have a back-end quickie, and we'll get more of your feedback. Or we'll get to your feedback. We haven't had the feedback yet. I'm going to do your feedback right after the random live shot of the day. I need a drink.
It's the random live shot of the day. Where are you going today? You never know where you'll end up with the random live shot of the day.
And tonight's random live shot of the day takes us to the west, to Perth. I know we've got a few viewers, Beck and Travis, out there in watching from WA. This is a beautiful view from St. John of God Mount Lawley Hospital. You can see the famed Swan River, and for anyone who's spent time in Perth, I reckon that skyline really does look its best just before sunset. Temperatures are sitting at around 19 degrees at the moment, with clear skies and a light breeze. Perfect conditions before a warmer weekend ahead. And tomorrow, it's going to be, what did we say? Partly sunny, 14 to 18 degrees. Isn't it funny? I feel like they've changed the terminology. It used to be partly cloudy. Now they say partly sunny. Is that wokeness? Oh, we can't say it's partly cloudy. We need to be positive.
It's a more positive attitude, that's all.
Yes, indeed. Let's take a look at some feedback coming through to McKnight Tonight. Jeanette says, happy Tipsy Thursday, everyone. I have a whiskey. I think I need it tonight. Well, yes, that's a very good question. Jeanette, why do you need the whiskey? Tell us. Been a big week? I'm like you, though. I need a wine. Why are you laughing?
Because I had the wrong camera to line.
Were you
No,
over there?
We can go back. You go back to camera 2 now. All right, we're done. We're done. All right, here we go.
Oh, man, I was in a loop. Beck says, my opinion, Trump is too easily manipulated by people who can control him like a puppet. I think the man has got severe issues. Maybe true, Beck, but I stand by it. He lies all the time. He'll change his mind. But I think to him a deal is a deal, and that's why Putin is really getting on his nerves at the moment. Own You're Crazy says, what do you expect from someone who has had their country's constitution multiple times to remain in power well past his sell-by date? Putin is, well, it's not democracy. We know that. They have elections, but it's not democracy in Russia. We know that. Gavin Wright says, K-Rod's heart sank up the rebuke. Not even a home away extra could pull that reaction off. Yeah, it was funny. In fairness to him, he copped that from Trud, and then he was like, afterwards, I'm sorry, it was before I was the ambassador, and he gets the drink. He's like, and Andrew, the reporter, is literally asking that question over his head and didn't even realise. It was a moment. Beck says, Rudd has, in my personal opinion, been a silent achiever. Well, he obviously has. I mean, you literally have the members of the Liberal Party, including Tony Abbott, who is certainly no fan of Kevin Rudd's. You have him saying that Kevin Rudd did a great job. So what I appreciate about that, I keep talking about this constant, just petty politics. And what has been interesting about this is that you have Tony Abbott, Jane Hume, Andrew Hastie all standing up and saying, no, Kevin Rudd did a great job here, and whatever criticism he had to take from Donald Trump, he actually did a really good job. That's my kind of politics. Credit where credit's due, but God, tear them down when they need it, and I'll be the first to tear them down. It's funny, on the comments, I was going through the comments on YouTube, and someone said, why are you supporting Lydia Thorpe? You might remember a few weeks ago I supported her. What was the issue? Do you remember the issue, Amanda? I'm having a mental blank. But I replied to them and I said, well, I don't always support Lydia Thorpe, but on this issue I do. And I will stand up and support people on the issues, not because of who they are and not because of what party they are. So I will have a go at them and I will support them. And I think that's healthy. I think it's really healthy for democracy. Mikey Spikey 79 says, I find it absolutely baffling when an opposition party that has lost so much popularity self-implodes. The ALP and even One Nation are just rubbing their hands. If the Liberal Party keep going like this, One Nation is going to be the benefactor. And it's quite amazing how One Nation are polling at the moment. And I think it's only going to get better. Will Barnaby Joyce end up with One Nation? Who knows? But either way, One Nation is going to increase in popularity. And I saw Tony Abbott on Afternoon Briefing today. And he said, it was quite interesting because Tony Abbott, when he was Prime Minister, would never go on the ABC, but now he's spruiking his book. And he actually said regarding Pauline Hanson that she has grown. In her second phase, she has grown into a really good politician. And she has more structure, she has more of an idea of what she wants to be, and he said she's actually connecting with voters. And I thought that was quite interesting. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but I thought that was quite interesting. On Your Crazy says, what does churlish mean, Robs? It means impolite and rude. So basically Jane Hume is saying that Sussan Ley was being rude by her comments about Kevin Rudd after all the good work he had done. So that, yeah, churlish. It's rude, it's impolite, that kind of thing. Gareth says, go Kevin. Great that Albo and Rudd have dealt with Trump in such a great way. Not kissing up to them, but still being respectful. Yeah, absolutely. Albo was very clever, not just nodding and agreeing. And I think he handled himself better than the Canadian Prime Minister, who talked tough of Trump, but then sort of sucked up a little bit. I genuinely thought Albanese was respectful, not rude, but didn't suck up either. I thought he handled it very well. Jimmy says, partly cloudy versus partly sunny. The weather war! That's a nice one to end on, Jimmy. Thank you very much. Keep your feedback coming. I will get to it more. And yes, tonight we will fit in a back-end quickie. Keep watching. You are watching. Keep watching. You are watching. You will be watching McKnight Tonight.
Fun, insightful interviews from a washed-up producer with nothing to lose. McKnight Tonight. McKnight Tonight. Here comes McKnight Tonight.
Well, an inquiry into cults in Victoria has led to some shocking allegations against the City Builders Church. Revelations by my next guest tonight include claims of gay conversion therapy, rape victims discouraged from going to police, and demands they don't have an abortion if a pregnancy results from those rapes. To find out more about this shocking story, I'm joined by Clare Heath-McIvor, who gave evidence at that inquiry. Claire, welcome to McKnight Tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the City Builders Church is actually run by your father, Pastor Brian Heath. You call it a cult you grew up in. At what point did you realise you were in a cult?
Oh, isn't that the million-dollar question? I think when people think of cults, you often think of people that have been, recruited in or radicalised in. But for the majority of us, we actually grew up inside or were recruited through someone we love. And 63.4% of respondents to the parliamentary inquiries questionnaire said that. So for me, it was my entire world. I was homeschooled. I was socialised almost exclusively with people from the church. I was, this was just
It was
my
life.
It was just my life. So over the years, you have moments where something peaks and you go, what is this? Nah. And then you squash it down because this is everyone you love. It's your whole social circle. For some people, it's their jobs. For others, it's where they live and worship and socialise and, live, work and play. So for me, it was all three. It took until my mid-20s. Actually, this is just a really long answer to a short question. But, I got out at age 32.
You have all the time in the world. Was there a turning point? Well, let's talk about this. You were forced into a marriage and you say this was part of gay conversion therapy. Was this your turning point? Did you know you were marrying a gay man?
I think forced marriage is the wrong word to use here. In City Builders, like in a lot of other churches, marriages are suggested, heavily suggested, or, there's this whole idea that you have to save sex for marriage and that God hates divorce. And within our particular sect, we had to submit our carnal desires, our crushes or whatever, to Dad, and he'd pray about it, and then he'd tell us whether or not God thought it was a good idea, and then we would either pursue that relationship or we wouldn't. In Patrick's and my case, he had been through conversion practices. So not just conversion therapy. Therapy, we think of, a counsellor sitting down with somebody and teaching them how not to be gay. That actually just doesn't happen in any ethical therapeutic setting anymore. We do have grave concerns that still goes on underground in many groups. But conversion practices, change or suppression practices, it can be everything from casting out demons to prophesying straightness over a person, to prophesying over them that they'll marry a certain person or they'll have kids or this will be their ministry. A lot of pastoral care, a lot of preaching against, all of that sort of thing. So it creates this ecosystem around a person where they learn to hate themselves. So they learn to internalize that homophobia. And that's what the Change and Suppression Practices Prohibition Act from 2022 really addressed. But yes, I was in an arranged marriage. I could have turned that marriage down, but I fully believed at that time something I know to be false now, is that homosexuality was something you could cure. And we know it's not. It's not something you can cure. It's perfectly fine. It's perfectly great. But yeah, I unfortunately, I was not a magical virgin. I was just a regular old virgin, Rob, and I didn't turn anyone straight. It's as disappointing to me as it is for everybody else.
I love it. But, okay, you weren't forced, but I think it would be fair to say you were manipulated. Your whole life sounds like a manipulation.
Yes, that would be fair to say. It wasn't my marriage that was the turning point for me. There'd been moments over the years that had been horrendously difficult, but on the day in question, it was actually the day I found out I was pregnant with my son, our son. It was I'm sorry, I'm going to mention miscarriage here, but it was the 5th pregnancy in 1 year, and I'd had 4 consecutive losses. And I remember being so thrilled that morning when I, got this news that I'd been waiting for. And we'd been doing it hard, my husband and I. And my dad, I'd said, Patrick could use a pastoral care visit. And as Dad was walking in that day, I was driving out of the driveway going for lunch with friends, and I thought, oh, why does he look like he's about to, like his shoulders were up and his fists were clenched? And I thought, that doesn't look like a pastoral care visit, but I opted to go out for lunch anyway. And when I returned, my life had changed. They'd had an argument. My then husband had raised some concerns with my dad about specifically the handling of mental health and of abuse allegations, including abuse allegations regarding me, about things that I'd gone through. And that day, the process of our shunning began. Social invitations dry up, you're getting dropped from rosters. I'm starting to hear rumours about, you know what Claire's like. And I was like, hang on. Wasn't even there. So, the slander and the defaming starts, and the talk of, oh, she's crazy or things like that start. It's a very common tactic used, especially with women trying to escape cults and high control groups, is they'll attack them as being too emotional or being unsubmitted or being a Jezebel or that sort of thing. I wasn't even there at the first conversation. I just tried to broker the reconciliation, but there it was. And then there was no option to go back. We couldn't. It was either come in under complete subjection again, or it was on your way. And Dad just kept on saying, you're free to leave. And I was like, I don't want to leave. I want to stay. You're free to leave. You're free to leave. I was like, oh. So that's
a test in itself.
Yeah.
That's any doubts you might have. That's him basically forcing the issue and forcing you to make a choice. Can I just say something here? Yeah. We've invited you here. You don't need to apologize for your story or for what you're saying.
Absolutely not.
No.
Although I'm sure some people would rather.
There's been multiple times in this interview where you've apologized. And where does that come from? Does that come from this from your life in the church where you always had to apologize for who you were?
It's really funny. I've never noticed it. But yes, generally, if you are not in complete alignment or complete subjection with what they call covenant, or if you're not living in complete obedience, then you're apologizing to try to keep your standing in the group. And I will admit, Rob, that today has been a day in which a bit of stuff has happened on the cult scene. Myself and my fellow advocates, we get some harrowing calls. We get some harrowing messages from people that are in situations that are unthinkable. And
these are people in cults?
Yes. Especially since the inquiry, because there's a few of us on TikTok. Yeah. I'm on, we've got our website for survivors of coercive cults and high control groups. We make sure that we're visible enough for people to find us. But when people do, their stories are harrowing, and you sit with this, and you have to kind of draw this boundary with your compassion, because you're like, this is not my story, this is somebody else's story, but their echoes are so familiar. It's no matter what the transcendent belief system is inside a cult, and that's whether a cult is philosophical or pseudo-religious or, yoga cult or MLM cult or whatever it is, the tactics that are about sustained, patterned, cumulative, coercive control and total domination, they're so similar right across the board. So we deal with this every day, and you've got me on a day where I've had no less than 4 different cases come across my desk. And this is not a paid thing I do. This is a grassroots movement. Survivors of coercive cults and high control groups, we started the Victorian Cult Survivors Network to get a genuine community movement, genuine community co-design behind our Beyond Belief paper, our recommendations paper to the parliamentary inquiry. We're working with Stop Religious Coercion Australia. The stories are harrowing, but of course it does hark you back to your own stories, and you find yourself doing things like saying sorry excessively in an interview. So
You can say sorry. I'm not going to pull you up, and I don't want you to feel bad about it. I just want you to know you're safe here, and you can say anything you want. It really isn't a problem. That's where I'm coming from.
You're not safe though, because cults like to threaten for defamation.
They can come after me. You can't take what I don't have.
Amen to that, brother.
On that serious side of those people coming to you, sex is often a big part of cults. Now, you said you were a virgin when you got married, so I'm assuming, but maybe I'm wrong because there are different levels, of course. I'm assuming you weren't a victim of sexual abuse, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on that. But sexual abuse is a big part of cults.
Yes, I don't think I was. There was some abuse that happened in another sister cult that I've been asked whether that was sexual abuse, and I've kind of said, no, I don't think it was. It was definitely awful, but I don't think it was sexual abuse. If that case went to court, maybe that would be different. Maybe that would be found to have, an element to it. But
and also, what we consider sexual abuse today has changed from even 10 years ago.
Yeah. So, that's a whole thing. But sexual abuse it's rife. It's I think 52.4% of people said that they'd suffered some form of physical or sexual abuse inside cults. So that is massive. But somebody said to me the other day, do you consider an arranged marriage to a gay conversion therapy survivor to be sexual abuse by proxy? And I went, oh, Lord.
It's an interesting question.
Yeah. So I think while my story is perhaps a bit complicated, there are so many people who have these stories. And the ones that really irk me are the ones I've heard over and over again. I reported my sexual abuse, or I reported my rape. And this is not just city builders, okay? There's only been a couple of cases in city builders where somebody's told me of having reported a rape. But in other churches, in other alleged cults, people have said, I reported my rape or my sexual assault. I was forced to marry that man. I had in one case that guy then went and offended against his own biological child, and that when that woman escaped, like these stories are just awful. And it's really beyond the pale when it comes to what's acceptable in society in any level. But the issue with cults is not that that sexual abuse is illegal. It's that the system is used to cover it up. It's not.
And that coercive control of saying, well, I mentioned it earlier, you can't go to the police. If you have a baby out of rape, you have to have that baby. And on the City Builders Church, let's go back to that where you grew up on. Does that church believe it is above the law?
We heard regularly that the government of God is higher than the government of man, that the wisdom of God is higher than the wisdom of man. We were talking about bringing heaven to earth. We were talking about crossing over to take dominion in every domain. We were very much political in this. We believed that our morality was God's design and that we were to bring that to earth. So yeah, like they wouldn't say we're above the law, but they'd say the law of God is higher and we obey the law of God. And that sits in this interesting space called epistemic abuse, where they're splitting hairs, but they're getting at a certain direction. Whereas there are some other cults that are full on doomsday, that are full on,
Yes.
anti-authoritarian. The Sov-Sit movement is a really interesting one because it may seem like it's disconnected and discombobulated, but behind the scenes, it all really does connect together into this transcendent belief system with some serious, some significant figures that you could argue are those cultish sort of central or narcissistic characters. But having that transcendent belief system is another aspect of a cult. And in the sovereign citizen movement, that's quite anti-government.
Well, that's its whole other cult, isn't it? A different kind of cult. But church and faith groups like the City Builders Church, they are contesting the inquiry's broad definition of a cult. Now, they clearly feel threatened about it. Where do you stand on their objection? Because they don't seem to be doomsday cult people, but you said yourself, they feel like God is a higher power than the law.
Yes. So, and it's interesting, in my hearing, I actually mentioned a quote from Scott Morrison from when he lost the election and he preached at Horizon Church. And he said in this one particular clip, we don't trust the government of man, we trust the government of God. So this is a throwaway line that gets repeated throughout a lot of evangelicalism, but it's these fringe groups that can really apply this coercive persuasion, this coercive control to really indoctrinate people into a more harmful, more fringe version of this. Look at how this might damage a person over the course of time. Now, the data that came out in the questionnaire release, 95.9% of people reporting psychological damage. Something like 86 or 87% of people are reporting significant limitations on their personal freedom. This includes finances, sex and sexuality, choice of partners, all of that. 52.4% of people saying physical or sexual abuse. This is not okay in any setting. So what we're saying in the Beyond Belief paper is keep belief out of it. Freedom of religion is sacred, but freedom of religion is not, nor will it ever be, freedom to defraud, exploit, abuse, or deceive. And we're not looking for, this group preaches heavily on tithing. We're looking for, hey, are they surveilling your spending habits? Are they looking at your budget? Are they looking at the spreadsheet and seeing whether or not
are they controlling you?
Are they controlling you? We're not looking at whether or not somebody says, I want to take a vow of celibacy. We're looking at them and saying, are you coercing a person into rejecting their own sexuality and trying to be different to who they are? Are you trying to get a person to suppress their belief, personality, presentation? Are you controlling how they, access information, how they're educated, what they're reading, what they're watching? Are you using different elements of coercive persuasion? Are you using group dynamics against them? Are you being deceitful in your recruitment? I hear a lot of people say, we should be caring for children in cults, but whatever consenting adults do is up to them. The thing about consent in cults is it's not there. You might have consented to go to a barbecue with some lovely people, and the barbecue isn't the coercive act. It's what happens next. It's how they use love bombing, and they use flooding the zone, and they use isolation from family, and they use, this is our higher truth, our transcendent belief system. That's how it becomes grooming, and that's how it becomes cultic. I went to a wonderful church after exiting City Builders. Of course, it's been accused of being cliquey and all these different things. Every church has got its lurks and jerks, but they had a lot of jerks, let me tell you. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Every church has got...
It's good that you can laugh about it all.
If you didn't like the gallows humour that keeps the survivor groups afloat, I swear it's you'd have us committed if you looked at it, but don't have us committed. This church that I went to had such clear transparency lines. They went over and above with their financial reporting. They went over and above with their child safe procedures. They went over and above with making sure that you knew if you had a grievance with the pastor where you could go. They had a board that was legitimate in its ability to hold him accountable, and it wasn't a fake sort of accountability that was just there to greenlight the boss. It was a really beautiful, I would say healthy community. And I'm still in contact with some of those people, whereas I'm in contact with nobody who is still on the inside of City Builders.
Well, that actually includes your sister, doesn't it, Renee Heath?
Yeah.
Because she didn't leave the church like you did. In fact, she's come under the spotlight for her extreme views after contesting and winning an upper house seat in Victoria. What do you make of her political career, and should the electorate be worried?
I'm not here to talk about her. I think I've said enough on the public record in the lead up to the election to, wave the flags of concern there. What I can say is that many of their doctrines, one that was common then, and it was still up on the website a few weeks ago, it's probably been scrubbed now, but preaching about being as one man, about being, honouring and being in one accord and being as one man. So that doctrine for us was wherever you go, you take the word of the Father, you take the word of the house, you take the spirit of the house, you represent us. And we represent God. So that was the heart of that message. And yeah.
It's funny, it didn't occur to me that talking about your sister would be a trigger for you. And so I'm obviously not trying to upset you.
It's not a trigger per se. It's just out of respect for democracy and out of respect for the fact that the person that I want under the spotlight for inappropriate influence over people's lives isn't her. So that's difficult. And when I say respect for democracy, the criticism that we had in the beginning is that she wasn't elected via, she wasn't elected via popular vote. She was number one. She wasn't
elected on her values.
No, she was elected because she was top of the ticket in the safest seat in Victoria. And after Ed O'Donoghue's retirement from that seat, it had gone to an interim thing that the committee, the state council had voted on it.
Yeah, she was guaranteed to win.
Yeah, but she got it by one vote. So 55 to 58, Catherine Burnett-Wake took it in the interim time. 55 to 58, Renee took it the second time. So it was that slim a margin, and values weren't really a discussion, and there wasn't really scrutiny. She wasn't really fronting up and saying, this is who I am and what I stand for. Yeah. And so that's, I understand that would have been pretty distressing for them, the estranged sister fronting up on 60 Minutes, leading a bunch of other victims. And I get that. It's awful.
Well, you've made an interesting point. Your story is not her story and her story is not your story.
Correct.
But you have a right to tell your story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do what I do not because I want to. My goodness. I'd rather shut up about this. But if you know that conversion practices are going on in a church, if you know the statistics on what that does to the mental health of a young person who's exposed to that, if you know that there's homeschooling, which I equate with educational neglect. I had several significant injuries when I was a kid. I didn't have normal medical care. I had a dislocated shoulder for 10 years. It was just growing out of socket. But we'd pray for this pain, or we'd get this pastor to massage it in the basement. Things like this that just, they're neglectful. And I'm a pretty mild case in the grand scheme of things. Sure, I was coerced into a business. I lost a whole lot of money selling up to get out of City Builders. I was in an arranged marriage with a gay conversion survivor. there's been a lot of things that have happened to me, but I am not the worst story I've heard, not by a long shot. When you step into this space as an advocate, the stories that you hear, every single one of them is the worst one you've ever heard. And I think it's been a bit shocking to the committee to hear just how bad it is.
Well, look, Claire, it's important people like you speak up. I really do appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us on McKnight tonight.
My pleasure.
And
Here comes McKnight tonight.
well, what an interview. Thank you, Claire, for being so open and honest. I really do appreciate that. Before I get to your feedback, I've got a bit of a back end quickie. So turn your lights down low, grab your drink. Excuse me? What was that? No, hang on. What was that?
No, it's just
Because I was savouring the moment?
yeah. It's a little off-putting. Good go.
No. It's off-putting me. I'm in trouble. So in the latest Beauty and the Beast, I got to deliver my favourite joke ever. And I don't know. I know 2 jokes. This is one of them.
Carlotta, I've got to say that when you said it was she was dating a blind man, it reminded me of that old story I once heard that there was a nun having a bath and there was a knock at the door. And she said, "Who is it?" And he said, this man from behind the door said, "It's the blind man." And she thought about it and went, "Okay, come in." And he walks in and he says, "Nice tits, where do you want the blinds?"
Oh, God.
No laugh from Amanda there. I think that might be the generational divide right there.
I think it's fair to say Amanda does not find me funny. It's like every Amanda in my life doesn't find me funny.
True that.
Booty and the Beast is available if you search Booty and the Beasts AU on TikTok and Instagram, and bootybeasts.au or Booty and the Beast. I should have prepared the website address really. But honestly, I love doing this show. Prue McSween has put everything into this. I love it. I love being part of it. I feel very fortunate to be part of it. So go and check it out. It's Booty and the Beast. It's on YouTube. You can watch the video podcast, or you can listen to it on your Apple Podcasts and all the other platforms. So go and have a look. It's a lot of fun. All right, let's take a look at some feedback coming through to McKnight tonight before we wrap it up for the week and for a whole week. Beck says, "I feel so much empathy for people in this lady's position." Yeah, she's an amazing woman. Claire is an amazing woman. There's no doubt about that. Over the page we go. Clearly no familial bond there. The need for control was so dominant. Yes, Own Your Crazy is talking about the fact that she was, well, she doesn't use the word forced, but I would use the word coerced into marrying a gay man. He knew he was gay, but as part of their conversion therapy, they thought marrying the pastor's daughter would fix him at being gay. Just crazy stuff. Mikey Spiky 79 says, "Cults are often environments that those with strong personalities prey upon vulnerable people for their own advantages. It is often a bubble where the outside world almost doesn't exist. It is sick." That is so true, Mikey Spikies. That is so true. Beck says, "Can I seriously say thank you for educating me tonight, because I wouldn't have actually thought about when it comes to a cult." I assume that means cult. Yeah, I think it's been very, very interesting, Beck. I really do. Gareth says, "I love how Rob called out Claire for apologising so much. A delicate topic handled with great care. Thank you, Claire, for sharing your story and shining a light on these issues." Yeah, I really feel... That's why I felt bad. She's telling her story. There were a couple of things. When she kept apologising for her story, I just didn't want her to feel like she had to say sorry. And I didn't mean to push a button with the sister. She'd spoken about it publicly, so I thought it was okay to go down that topic. So because I don't basically, when we do these interviews, I don't ask for off limits and anything like that. And I've never had a situation with any of these interviews where something is off limits. And so I just ask questions. And she handled it very well, though. Own You're Crazy says, I wouldn't be sorry for leaving, surviving and thriving beyond life with religious repression. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. Own You're Crazy. Over the page we go. David Roberts 9737 says, Mr. McKnight, you said Trump always lies. Can you please provide an example on what Donald Trump has lied about? Look, David Roberts, even today, Andrew Bolt did a column. Now, Andrew Bolt would call himself a conservative, and his whole column was about how Trump lies. But I'll give you an example just from today. Donald Trump had previously said that his ballroom extension would not even touch the White House, would not even cause, wouldn't even come up against it. There was so much room. He's literally tearing down the East Wing for this ballroom. No one knew that. And then all of a sudden the construction crews are in. Now, that's not even a consequential, well, it is consequential for the history of the East Wing. But what I mean is it's not consequential as far as policy goes. I think we have to be honest. You can like Donald Trump, but he is a liar. He will say one thing and he will do a completely another thing. Even Andrew Hastie said that he didn't believe that Trump didn't know who Kevin Rudd was. He did it for theatre. He did it for fun. So I actually wasn't passing judgment. I just said we have to accept that he's a liar. Sorry? Well, yeah, he's talked about... You didn't have your mic on.
Curing autism.
Things like that. I don't think it's disingenuous to say that Trump is a liar. I think... And I raised the point, though, that I think Trump respects the deal. I'm not really sure what I've said wrong here. I don't think there's any question that Trump lies. And that doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on. But come back to me. I'm willing to hear this out. Mikey Sparky has just said it's youtube.com/@BootyTheBeasts to watch the show on YouTube. And people, according to Trump, Own You're Crazy says, has been waiting 150 years for a White House ballroom. And Beck finally says, don't forget to tune in to the ABC on Sunday. I think it might be the final episode of The Assembly, which Beck is in, and she has been doing amazing. Beck, you have my email address. I've said it out loud. rob@tvblackbox.com.au. Contact me. We need to have you on the show talking about your experience shooting The Assembly. It's all done now. ABC has no control over you. So please get in contact. I'd love to talk to you and we'll arrange for that to happen. All right. I think that brings us to the end of McKnight Tonight. We are not here next week, but there will be little treats posted on the YouTube page. We will be back in a week's time, and I promise we will have some interviews you will want to see. So thank you for joining us for Tipsy Thursday. I am Rob McKnight, and it's good night from McKnight. See you in a week's time. Cheers.
McKnight tonight. McKnight tonight. It's good night from McKnight.